Hi there. I just finished grading the second discussion board about why choose the liberal arts and wanted to share my responses in a video with you again this time. And I wanted to say, first of all, that I really genuinely enjoyed reading the responses to the discussion board this time. I know that a lot of you have alluded to the fact that you've had discussion boards in the past that you didn't find particularly valuable. And as an instructor, I've had the same thing. But I really, really enjoyed reading your responses, and I appreciate how much you're really engaging with your classmates in your responses. And this, with me giving my responses via a video, it's something new that I'm trying this semester, and I would welcome any feedback that you have about whether you would prefer to have me engaging in the discussion board itself or posting my feedback a little more holistically at the end of the discussion like this. So, but again, for this week, there were several themes that seemed to come up. One that I really enjoyed seeing, because it's something that that is really interesting to me, is the whole idea of learning as an act of contemplation and of leisure. That idea of the Greek word Scollay, which is the root of school and scholar. I did a book study or a book club a couple of summers ago where the book talked about that concept, and it was really intriguing to me, and it made me really think about who I have in my life that I can engage in that kind of discussion with. I have a lot of friends, a lot of coworkers who, we have a great time talking and interacting, and but I have just a couple friends that I can think of that are really those kinds of people that I engage, that they always ask those kinds of deep, hard questions, and sometimes it can be intimidating. Sometimes it can make me feel a little insecure when they ask those kinds of questions, especially if it's something that I haven't taken the time to think about. But having somebody who will challenge you, that's something that I really hope for each of you, is that you have somebody in your life, that you have a friend who does that, who they're going to ask you those kinds of deep questions and really make you think about big questions in life, and have those kinds of intellectual conversations that go beyond just, family things and current events and that kind of thing, but really digging into the deep questions of life. And another theme that I saw that I think is really interesting, and I hope that you continue to engage in conversations about this, is the idea of technology and just our changing environment because of technology and how that affects learning. And like I said, I hope you continue to engage in conversations like that, because like some of you pointed out, it's not all bad. We tend to think of things in extremes, as either technology is destroying our society or technology is the greatest thing ever. And it's important to recognize that it has both its pros and its cons. For a lot of different things. For our relationships it does, but it also does for our learning. So if you think about what we have at our fingertips in terms of knowledge, I mean, it's more than any generation ever has before, because when you think of how people had to engage with the body of knowledge available to them, things like textbooks, history books, dictionaries, that kind of thing, the way they had to engage with those texts in previous generations was they had to have read it in order to know what was in it, or they had to know other people who had read it, who could direct them to the information that they needed to find. And now with Google and smartphones, we have such a wealth of information right at our fingertips that we don't have to engage with things in the same way. And yet sometimes that means that we don't... I don't know quite how to say it. I think some of you got to it in your discussion, but that we don't value the information necessarily the same way, or value the things that we learn in the same way. And then also the questioning. So some of you pointed out we do still question things all the time. We're always asking for the answers to questions. But then if we don't spend the time finding those answers, if it's a quick response, then how much does it impact us, and how is that impact different? Not necessarily better or worse, but different, and acknowledging that difference, I think, is an important thing for deciding what technology does to the process of learning and where we may need to make some changes. So, and another thing is in the question of memorization, and I didn't see this come up in the discussion, or if it did, I don't remember a specific conversation, but it's one thing that I think about a lot, that we don't have to memorize the same way that we did in previous generations, because we have calculators, we have smartphones, we have access to a lot of information. Memorizing dates in history seems a little bit pointless when you can just ask Google at any time if you're curious about it. But then the one thing that I think is worth thinking about is when we aren't memorizing, what does that do? Because it's been proven that memorizing things does something to our brains. And so if we aren't memorizing, or if we aren't memorizing what in past times we would have memorized, what does that do to our brains? How does it affect the way our brains kind of build themselves over time? And if it's a detriment to not be memorizing, then maybe we should ask ourselves what we should be memorizing. If it's not dates in history or the multiplication tables or certain things like that can be easily looked up, what should we be memorizing? Maybe it's things like poetry, where the rhythm and the pattern of language is something that would be of benefit to our communication style and pattern, and our ways of speaking. Or maybe it's sacred texts, where having that wisdom in those sacred texts right there, having memorized it and having it at the forefront of our minds, would be a benefit to our lives in other ways. So these are just some questions that came to my mind in reading your discussions. And I hope that you continue to engage in these conversations about what learning looks like, how technology affects it. I really appreciated seeing how many of you see value in studying the liberal arts as part of a pattern of lifelong learning. And I really hope that continues, and that you continue to be advocates for the liberal arts and the things that we learn in our pursuit of just a broader understanding of the world. So again, thank you all for your great posts. I really enjoyed reading them, and I look forward to our next discussion board about the textbook. So have a great evening, and I will see you all online.